Tales of Beatrix Potter. About the author, Helen Beatrix Potter, 28th of July, 1866 to 22nd December, 1943, was an English writer, illustrator, and natural scientist. She is the best known for her children's books featuring animals, most of which she illustrated herself. Beatrix spent her childhood years sketching and painting different aspects of nature, insects, animals, and plants with intricate detail. Her careful drawings of fungi were appreciated by botanists. Long before she became a published author, Beatrix Potter drew illustrations for her favorite stories. When she first wrote The Tale of Peter Rabbit, it was an instant success. Beatrix began writing and illustrating children's books full-time. Beatrix went on to write about 30 books, the best known being her 24 children's tales. She also designed spin-off merchandise based on her children's books. Contents: The Tale of Peter Rabbit, The Tale of Johnny Town Mouse, The Tale of Ginger and Pickles, The Tale of Mr. Jeremy Fisher. The Tale of Peter Rabbit. Before reading, do you obey your parents? Have you ever been into any trouble due to non-obedience? Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits. Their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Miss Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the field or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor." Old Miss Rabbit took her basket and umbrella. "Be good little bunnies. Run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out," she said. Miss Rabbit went through the woods to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail were good little bunnies. They went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who is very naughty, ran straight to Mr. McGregor's garden. He squeezed in under the gate. First, he ate lettuces and French beans. Then he ate radishes. Peter ate too much, and then, feeling sick, he went to look for parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom did he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees, planting cabbages. He jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was very frightened. He rushed all over the garden. He had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went even faster. Unfortunately, he ran into a gooseberry net, and the large buttons on his jacket got caught in it. It was a new blue jacket with brass buttons. Peter gave up. He shed big tears. His sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows. They flew up to him. They encouraged him not to give up. Just then Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve. He planned to pop it on the top of Peter. But Peter wriggled out of the gooseberry net just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. Peter now rushed into the tool shed. He jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Achoo! Mr. McGregor heard him sneeze. He was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed. Mr. McGregor thought that he had hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn the flower pots over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed again. Achoo! Mr. McGregor heard him clearly, and was after him in no time. Peter jumped out of the can and ran. Mr. McGregor tried to put his foot upon Peter, but Peter jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor to jump through. He was also tired of running after Peter, so he went back to his work. Out in the garden again, Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright. He had no idea which way to go. He was also wet because of sitting in the can. After some time, he began to wander, going lippity-lippity, looking all around. He found a door in a wall. It was locked. There was no room for a fat little rabbit like him to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep. She was carrying peas and beans to her family in the woods. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. He tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond. Mr. McGregor filled his water cans here. A white cat was staring at the goldfish in the pond. She sat very still. Now and then the tip of her tail twitched. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, Benjamin Bunny. Peter went back towards the tool shed. Suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the nose of the hoe. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Peter climbed up upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. He saw Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter. Beyond Mr. McGregor was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow. He started running as fast as he could go behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of Peter Rabbit at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate. He was safe at last, outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up on Peter's little jacket and shoes to make a scarecrow, to frighten away the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole. He shut his eyes. Peter's mother was busy cooking. She wondered what Peter had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. Peter was not well that evening. His mother put him to bed and made some herb tea. She gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime, she said. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread, milk, and blackberries for supper. The Tale of Johnny Town Mouse. Before reading, have you ever gone on a vacation? What did you like most? Did you make new friends there? Timmy Willie was a little country mouse. He was born in a garden. The gardener sent vegetables to town once a week. He packed them in a big hamper. One day, Timmy Willie crept in through a hole into the hamper. After eating some peas, Timmy Willie fell asleep. He was still fast asleep when the gardener left the hamper by the garden gate. The cart carrier picked it up when he passed by. Jolt, jolt, jolt. Timmy Willie awoke in a fright with the jolting in the cart. He trembled among the jumbled up vegetables. At last the cart stopped at a house. The hamper was taken out and set down. The cook gave 6 pence to the carrier. The cart rumbled away. The cook took the hamper into the kitchen. He opened the hamper and began to unpack the vegetables. Out sprang the terrified Timmy Willie. The cook jumped upon a chair, shouting, "A mouse! A mouse! Call the cat, Sarah!" Timmy Willie did not wait. He rushed along the table till he came to a little hole, and in it he popped. He dropped half a foot and crashed into the middle of a mouse dinner party. "Who in the world is this?" inquired Johnny. Town Mouse. Johnny Town Mouse was born in a cupboard. He lived in the house along with the other mice. Timmy Willie introduced himself to the mice, all with long tails and white neckties. The dinner was of 8 courses. All the dishes were strange to Timmy Willie. He He was a little afraid of tasting them, only he was very hungry. The noise upstairs made him so nervous that he dropped a plate. "Never mind, they don't belong to us," said Johnny. Two young mice who were waiting on the others went upstairs to the kitchen. Timmy Willie learned with horror that they were being chased by the cat. He felt faint. "Try some jelly?" asked Johnny Town Mouse. Timmy Willie shook his head to say no. "No? Would you rather go to bed? I'll show you the most comfortable sofa pillow," said Johnny Town Mouse. The sofa pillow had a hole in it. It smelt of a cat. Timmy Willie preferred to spend a miserable night under the fender. It was the same the next day. An excellent breakfast was served. The mice were used to eating bacon. Unfortunately, Timmy Willie had been reared on roots and salad. Johnny Town Mouse and his friends came out all over the house in the evening. A crash caused by Sarah tumbling downstairs with a tea tray had left crumbs and sugar and smears of jam on the floor to be collected. Timmy Willie longed to be at home in his peaceful nest in a sunny bank. He did not like the food. The noise prevented him from sleeping. In a few days, he grew so thin that Johnny Town Mouse noticed it and asked him the matter. He listened to Timmy Willie's story about the garden. "It sounds a rather dull place. What do you do when it rains?" asked Timmy Willie. "When it rains, I sit in my little sandy burrow and shell corn and seeds from my autumn store. I peep out at the blackbirds in the lawn and my friend Cock Robin. When the sun come out again, you should see my garden and the flowers, roses, and pansies. There is no noise except the birds and bees and the lambs in the meadows." "There goes that cat again!" exclaimed Johnny Town Mouse. They ran for shelter to the coal cellar. Johnny Town Mouse said, "We have tried our best to entertain you, Timothy William." "Oh, yes, you have been most kind, but I do feel so ill," said Timmy Willie. "Perhaps it might be wiser for you to return in the hamper." Oh, yes," cried Timmy Willie. So Timmy Willie said goodbye to his new friends and hid in the hamper with a crumb of cake and a withered cabbage leaf. After much jolting, he was set down safely in his own garden. Johnny Town Mouse had promised to visit. The winter passed. The sun came out again. Timmy Willie sat by his burrow warming his little fur coat and sniffing the violets and grass. He had forgotten his visit to town. Up the sandy path with a brown leather bag came Johnny Town Mouse. Timmy Willie received him with open arms. "You have come at the best time of the year. We will have herb pudding and sit in the sun." It is a little damp," said Johnny Town Mouse, who was carrying his tail under his arm out of the mud. "What is that fearful noise?" Johnny Town Mouse said suddenly, violently. "That?" said Timmy Willie. "That is only a cow. I will ask her for a little milk. Cows are quite harmless, unless they happen to lie down upon you." "How are all our friends?" asked Timmy Willie. Johnny explained why he was paying his visit so early in the season. The family had gone to the seaside for Easter. The cook was doing cleaning with the instructions to clear out the mice. There were 4 kittens, 2 in the house, and the cat had killed the canary. "Whatever is this fearful racket now?" Johnny asked again. "That is only the lawnmower. I will go and fetch some of the glass clippings to make your bed. I'm sure you should settle in that country, Johnny." We shall see by Tuesday next week. The hamper has been stopped while they are at the seaside." "I am sure you will never want to live in the town again," said Timmy Willie. But Johnny Town Mouse did. He went back in the very next hamper of vegetables. He said it was too quiet. One place suits one person, and another place suits another person. The Tale of Ginger and Pickles. Before reading, would you like to own a shop someday? What will you sell? Once upon a time, there was a small village shop. Ginger and Pickles kept the shop. Ginger was a yellow tomcat and Pickles was a terrier. Ginger and Pickles sold nearly everything, except a few things like bootlaces and hairpins. The rabbits were afraid of Pickles. The shop was also patronized by mice. Only the mice were afraid of Ginger. Ginger always requested Pickles to serve the mice because he said they made his mouth water. I cannot bear to see the little mice going out of the door carrying their little parcels, said Ginger. I have the same feeling, replied Pickles, but it would never do to eat our own customers. They would leave us and go to Tabitha Twitchit. Tabitha Twitchit kept the other shop in the village. She did not give credit. Ginger and Pickles gave unlimited credit. So the customers came again and again, in spite of being afraid of Ginger and Pickles. There was always no money, but the sales were enormous. Because of no money, Ginger and Pickles had to eat their own goods. Pickles and Ginger always ate by candlelight after the shop was closed. When it was New Year, there was still no money, and Pickles was unable to buy a dog license. I am afraid of the police, said Pickles. It is your fault for being a terrier. Look, I do not require a license. I have tried to get a license on credit at the post office, said Pickles. Let us send in the bill again to Samuel Whiskers, Ginger. He owes us $22.9 for bacon. I do not believe that he plans to pay at all, replied Ginger, and I feel sure that Anna Maria pockets things. Ginger and Pickles retired to the back parlor. They did their accounts. They added up sums and sums and sums. Samuel Whiskers has run up a bill as long as his tail. Send in all the bills again to everybody, replied Ginger. After a time, they heard a noise in the shop. They came out of the back parlor. There was an envelope lying on the counter. A policeman was writing in a notebook. Pickles had a fit. He barked and he barked. Bite him, Pickles, bite him. He's only a doll, spluttered Ginger. The policeman went on writing in his notebook twice. He put his pencil in his mouth. Pickles barked till he was hoarse, but still the policeman took no notice. He had beady eyes and his helmet was sewed on with stitches. Soon he disappeared, but the envelope remained. Do you think that he has gone to fetch a real policeman? Asked Pickles. No, replied Ginger, who had opened the envelope. It is the rates and taxes of the new year. This is the last straw, said Pickles. Let us close the shop. They put up their shutters and left. Ginger began new work. He set up mice traps and lived in a warren. Pickles became a gamekeeper and pursued rabbits. The closing of the shop caused great inconvenience. Tabitha Twitchit raised the price of everything and she refused to give credit. So everybody was pleased when Sally Hennypenny sent out a printed poster to say that she was going to reopen the shop. Henny's opening sale, grand cooperative jumble. Penny's penny prices. Come buy, come try, come buy. The poster was really the most exciting. There was a rush on the opening day. The shop was crowded with customers. Sally Hennypenny tried to count out change. She insisted on being paid cash. She had laid out an assortment of bargains. There was something to please everybody. The Tale of Mr. Jeremy Fisher. Before reading, how do you think frogs, fishes, and other insects live together? What do they eat? Do they fight too? Once upon a time, there was a frog called Mr. Jeremy Fisher. He lived in a little house among the buttercups at the edge of a pond. Mr. Jeremy liked getting his feet wet. He never caught a cold. One day, he was pleased to see large drops of rain splashing in the pond. I will get some worms and go fishing, said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. If I catch more than 5 fish, I will invite my friends Mr. Alderman, Ptolemy, Tortoise, and Sir Isaac Newton for dinner. The alderman, however, eats salad. Mr. Jeremy put on a mackintosh and a pair of shiny galoshes. He took his rod and basket. He hopped to the place where he kept his boat. The boat was round and green. It was tied to a water plant in the middle of the pond. Mr. Jeremy took a reed pole and pushed the boat into the water. I know a good place to catch fish, said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. He stuck his pole into the mud and fastened it to the boat. Then he sat cross-legged and tied a little wriggling worm at the end of his pole. The rain trickled down his back. For an hour he waited for a fish to bite. "This is tiresome. I think I should eat some lunch," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. He took some lunch out of his basket. "I will eat a butterfly sandwich and wait till the shower is over," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. A great big water beetle came up underneath the lily leaf. It sat on the toe of one of his galoshes. Mr. Jeremy crossed his legs up and went on eating his sandwich. Once or twice something moved about amongst the rushes at the side of the pond. "I trust that is not a rat," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. "I think I should go away from here." Mr. Jeremy shoved the boat and dropped in the bait. There was a bite. "I have him by the nose!" cried Mr. Jeremy Fisher, jerking up his rod. But what a horrible surprise! Instead of a smooth, fat fish, Mr. Jeremy had caught Jack Sharp, the stickleback, covered with spines. The stickleback splashed about the boat, pricking and snapping. Then he jumped back into the water. A shoal of other little fishes put their heads out and laughed at Mr. Jeremy Fisher. Mr. Jeremy sat on the edge of his boat, sucking his sore fingers and peering down into the water. Then a much worse thing happened. A big, enormous trout came up with a splash, and it seized Mr. Jeremy with a snap. "Ow, ow, ow!" And then it turned and dived down to the bottom of the pond. But the trout did not like the taste of the Macintosh, so it spat him out again. Mr. Jeremy bounced up to the surface of the water. He swam with all his might to the edge of the pond. He hopped home across the meadow with his Macintosh in tatters. "I have lost my rod and basket, but it does not matter much, for I am sure I should never go fishing again." He put some sticking plaster on his fingers. That night his friends came to dinner. He could not offer fish, but he had something else in his larder. Sir Isaac Newton wore his black and gold waistcoat, and Mr. Alderman Ptolemy Tortoise brought a salad with him in a string bag. Instead of a nice dish of fish, they had a roasted grasshopper with ladybird sauce.